political ad paid for by the Kick Enterprise Club. Welcome to the Kick Podcast. The Kick Enterprise Club is a pro-business Democratic group here in Houston, Texas. We bring on all sorts of guests, candidates, lawyers, doctors, and while we hope you are very much entertained and informed by our guests, this is not intended to be professional advice. If you need that kind of advice, please go get that on your own. Just know that the podcast is here for entertainment purposes. Welcome to everybody. This is the Kick Podcast. This is actually the first episode, and we're happy to have Joe Jaworski, candidate for Attorney General in the race in Texas in 2026. So, Joe, before we get going on our three things about three things, just tell us who's Joe Jaworski.
Well, Fritz, thanks for letting me be the inaugural guest on your soon-to-be famous podcast. I love it. And really enjoyed speaking to your organization the other day at Hearsay.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
At Levy Park. Fritz, Joe Jaworski, Houston boy. I'll be 64 March 1st, so, almost happy birthday. I'm a third-generation Texas lawyer and proud to say that my wife and my son, Lee, will be fourth generation after he passes the bar exam later this month. Former mayor of Galveston. And as I like to tell people on the campaign trail, I'm the proud grandson of a Texas Democrat who prosecuted World War II Nazis and the President of the United States. So, as a lawyer and owner of the Jaworski law firm, I carry Leon Jaworski's legacy, my dear grandfather, who I knew very well. I'm also a drummer, always have been. That's my great hobby, and at one time, avocation, because I was a graduate of college, and instead of going to law school, I detoured, shall we say.
Detoured to tour.
Yeah, right, a frolic.
A frolic.
And for 4 years, I managed and played drums in a viable recording and touring act. And let me tell you, I enjoyed it. The band was called Other Bright Colors, and that music is available on Apple iTunes and Spotify.
There you go. A shameless plug. This
exactly. But it did give me a sense of America, and we were based out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and we made a point of touring the country. So I've always considered myself, a man who appreciates all things Americana, 50 states. And, one thing led to another, and I got into government when, as a young lawyer, I was asked and challenged to serve my community in Galveston. I served as a city council member for 6 years, term limited off, and then later served as mayor of Galveston, which was a real honor, but also a crucible, because I served right after a major hurricane and was tasked with rebuilding the island with massive amount of resources, which included the need to rebuild public housing, which if anyone were to Google Jaworski Galveston public housing, they would see the entire episode unfold online. It was a massive undertaking, a real honor to stand with working Galvestonians to make sure their housing was first class and provided for. Fritz, because my attitude was, if you mandatorily evacuated, thanks to the mayor's order to evacuate, and when the coast is clear, you deserve to come home.
Yeah.
No matter your station in life, no matter your income level. And so I made sure we got it built. It cost me politically. Yes, that's the story. But now it's fully...
Well, just to be clear about that, it wasn't just a casual cost. It cost you the election. You gave up being mayor because you took the right decision. So I want to use that as a jumping point because really and truly, we live right now in a time... Before we got on air, on this recording, you and I were talking about the fact that this feels weird right now. Everybody's raging. We forgot what it's like to be normal. So I just want to take just a second and ask you to recall for us all what it felt like to be normal. Give some examples of how the Office of Attorney General used to work.
Sure. Well, let me start by saying my wife and I, we graduated, husband and wife, from University of Texas School of Law. Tuition was affordable. I felt like the public institutions functioned in a reasonable way. They indicated they wanted Texans to stay here, so they made tuition affordable. It wasn't deregulated yet. It all made sense. Ann Richards was governor. We all think of her now as this Democratic icon, but it was just business in Texas. The oil pumped, people, had gasoline in their cars. There was good food on the table, entertainment, health care was provided. People lived well, and Texas had this sense of optimism. Going back even, 20 years before that, in the 1970s, you had icons in the office of Attorney General like John Hill, who made a career as a plaintiff's trial lawyer before, at a mature age, deciding to get into what we'll call politics, but didn't feel like politics. It was public service. He was an outstanding, exemplary Attorney General who would later serve as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He ran for governor as well, didn't quite get there. But these were men and you would also say women of substance with Ann Richards.
Yeah.
There wasn't anger. Sure, Republicans wanted to beat Democrats and Democrats wanted
That's
to beat.
always been the case,
Right.
yeah.
And that's fine. It's just like any lawsuit, or politics has an oppositional, we call it partisan or bipartisan, but an oppositional aspect to it. Like,
Sure.
there's two parties, one's going to win in each race, just like a lawsuit.
But in Texas, you can be from separate parties. The governor can be from one party, the lieutenant governor can be from another, and the attorney general can be from a different party than one of the others. So what was it like back in the days where there was an attorney general from one party and a governor or lieutenant governor from another?
Absolutely. It was a check on power, and that is good for people. It's like a speed limit. It curbs the excesses of a partisan environment. So I remember when George W. Bush beat Ann Richards, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But Bob Bullock was lieutenant governor,
Mm-hmm.
a Democrat. Dan Morales was attorney general, and on and on. And so that's what I think we need to return to. I know we'll talk about things more than just election outcomes here on this podcast, but what it felt like was balance.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. It felt like your car was balanced. You were driving down the road. It all made sense. It felt normal. Now, you feel like there's snipers, and I'm using that as a metaphor, people trying to trip each other up, and it's all about embarrassing the other side as opposed to accomplishing a joint mission. And I know the voters don't like it because we see them not turning out to participate in selecting our leaders.
Yeah.
And that's all you need to know. We need to create a better product so that people will show up at the polls and say, you know what, that's my kind of man or woman, because they stand for progress, and I'm going to vote for them.
Yep. No, that's super important. What I hear you say is that there was normalcy. There was, I like what you just said about the fact that we were all working together for the common good. So let's go to point number 2, which is it ain't that way anymore. We got a governor who is accused of all sorts of corruption. First question is there something, what does the attorney general do when a governor is corrupt? When there are no bid contracts going to folks who contributed to his campaign, et cetera. What's the role of the attorney general in that?
The attorney general is independently elected from the governor. It is a separate constitutional executive office, unlike the federal system where the president appoints the attorney general or nominates the attorney general and the Senate confirms. Here in Texas, our Constitution was written the last time in 1876, right at the end of Reconstruction. And I think the sentiment among the drafters of the Constitution was, let's not have concentrated power. Let's dissolve executive power among many offices. So you have the office of the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, the comptroller, big deal, land office, big deal. And the attorney general is indeed the top lawyer in the state who answers to 32 million Texans, not the governor, not the legislature. So to answer your question, Fritz, if the governor is going off and abusing the Texas Constitution or the laws, or even policy and practice, if you can't quite put your finger on it, you can investigate the governor. Yes, you can. I mean, Wasn't the governor impeached once,
Hmm?
and Ma Ferguson, then succeeded her husband. I'm just going to tell you that right now they're on the same team. They look the other way. The lieutenant governor has the attorney general's back, as we saw in the impeachment trial.
Mm-hmm.
The attorney general has the governor's back by turning the other way, as Greg Abbott repeatedly issues monthly proclamations based on some disaster. Used to be COVID, then it was the floods, now it's something else. The purpose of which is to suspend competitive bidding on all contracts. So the governor is accepting money and giving bids that he favors. So that's not right, and the attorney general should investigate that and at minimum speak up loudly as the vox populi, the voice of the people, and say that's not right. That's anti-competitive.
Right, right. Well, as you know, the Kick Enterprise Club is a group of pro-business Democrats, right? We just want normalcy. We want an even playing field. We think that everybody, Republican, Independent, Democrat, North, South, East, and West, want the same thing because that is going to be stability. We all want stability. So right now, we also know that the comptroller, Kelly Hancock, unilaterally just wiped out the HUB program. The HUB program historically underutilized businesses. To my surprise, when we looked into this, I was a little surprised because the HUB program does not require a certain number of dollars be spent with different kind of supplies. It merely offers a platform to enable the government to buy from historically underutilized businesses. There was no harm in allowing that to go, but by deleting it practically, it takes a lot of options off the table. What does the Attorney General do, or can you do as Attorney General, to reinstate that program? It's part of the Comptroller's office, but is there something you can do about that?
Yes, there is. And let me point out that the historically underutilized businesses are still presently underutilized businesses. And so it was good policy, and everyone benefited from it. The face of Texas is very diverse, Fritz, as you well know, and it is appropriate for a state of such massive grasp and such amazing available resources to share the wealth. But since Trump has been elected, and at the risk of sounding partisan, I'm just telling the truth, Republican politicians have sold out to his agenda. And part of that agenda is to destroy what we colloquially refer to as DEI. So the elimination of the HUB program benefits and intentions is just another version of eliminating DEI programs. We see it in education, where certain gender studies and Black history studies are being eliminated at Tier 1 universities that don't need politicians telling them what to do. What can the Attorney General do? Let's just, think forward, and with everyone's blessing, I take the oath of office in 2027. First off, the Attorney General can take a position on these things. There is no law, there's no Supreme Court law that says DEI is illegal, or that, affirmative action is no longer available. The federal government actually still has historically underutilized business programs that apply to municipalities that receive federal money. So this is a state of Texas thing that Abbott, Patrick, and Paxton are doing to assuage the concerns of their base voters in a primary election contest that is coming up in a couple of weeks. Once we're past that, they need to stand before the 32 million Texans, those of whom wish to vote, and answer for what they've done. The Democratic Party ought to call them to account for what they're doing. So the Attorney General can investigate, can reinstate in his own office, which employs 4,200 Texas workers. I think that's the largest agency among the executives. I don't think the governor has 4,200 employees, largely because the Attorney General collects child support, collects other fines based on laws that the Attorney General can enforce. Fritz, we file the lawsuits. So we have over 800 lawyers in what was once a heralded largest law firm in the state of Texas. Right now, people have left because they're depressed or embarrassed by Ken Paxton's notorious conduct. And so the answer is you can hire your own work staff that reflects the face of Texas, a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce. Then you can use the bully pulpit, if you will, to condemn these sort of unilateral decisions that deny underutilized businesses an avenue to success. And then finally, you can issue legal opinions, which is what the Attorney General does, and worst case scenario, file suit to enforce strategic norms of business that would allow underutilized businesses to be at the table.
So executive authority versus discretion. Is there a difference between true authority and discretion, and when do you use each? Because I assume that as the Attorney General, you can drop the hammer, but you can also use this maybe informal kind of power you were just talking about, where you weigh in without taking a formal action. How do you see that distribution? Do you do more? Is one more effective than the other? And what's your personal approach to that?
Well, the Attorney General's great power is to file a lawsuit, which obviously, as we all know, depends on courts and juries to be the legal and fact finder. But the Attorney General also has discretion to enforce certain laws or elect not to prosecute and enforce certain situations. Ken Paxton is a persecutor, much like the leaders of the Spanish Inquisition, in deciding what's moral and what isn't, and who the winners are and the losers are. Shall I persecute the parents of a trans child who has come into the ambit of my attention? Or should I do something productive that benefits everyone? For example, I will decide in my discretion, Joe Jaworski, to enforce Texas Election Code 13.046D as in David, which very simply says every principal, public, private, charter, religious, and even these new voucher schools, every high school principal must, it's mandatory for it, offer registration to the senior class twice a year. Now, that is a great law. It's been on the books since 1985, and it's simply not enforced. Certain school districts follow it, and bravo, and they let the League of Women Voters in or other designees or delegates to come in and do the registration. But I'd say 70% of schools just don't have the resources. They're just trying to buy pencils and other materials and barely making it. What if the Attorney General enforced that instead of demonizing and persecuting people? So it's all about the choices you make as Attorney General. But in terms of like being able to, make something happen, I would say Attorney General opinions, you are in charge of that. You're in charge of the Open Meetings and Open Records Act. You also are in charge of approving public securities when a city, a county, a school district issues a bond, and your staff is really supposed to just kind of follow the letter of the law. You're not supposed to do what Ken Paxton is doing, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, which is to decide, let's see, BlackRock, they are net neutral, so that's not favoring oil and gas. I'm going to block them from participating. I mean, that's anti-competitive, and he shouldn't be doing that. But in terms of actually making something happen, typically the strategic deal is you file a lawsuit and you get a result in court.
Okay. Well, along those lines, related to ICE, we can't have any kind of conversation these days without addressing ICE. What is the Texas Attorney General able to do regarding what ICE is doing and what we expect? Few people realize that the largest location for ICE detentions is right here, Harris County, right? And people are shocked by that. We don't talk about it because it's inconvenient, because I don't know why we don't talk about it more. As that becomes more known, as we suffer the consequences at the work sites, at family level, all sorts of, what is it that you can do to help that situation?
You look at what's happening in Minneapolis, a very small geographic area with a lot of angry people. And then you look at Harris County, which is, one of the biggest counties in America, and Texas, one of the largest states. What I can do as Attorney General is not block municipalities from exercising their power. And what I'm talking about is local decision-making authority. For example, if the city of Austin or the city of Dallas were to say by, vote of their city council, we reject ICE's request for assistance, in any permutation that you can think of. Right now, our Attorney General would say, you don't have that power, I'm stopping you. The Death Star will tell you how it works. We are the state of Texas. That ignores centuries in America, almost 250 years now, of the spectrum of power, from federalism, national to state, and then within each of the 50 states now, counties, cities, school districts, and special districts. I'm a believer in local control. You might imagine I'd say that as a former mayor. Fritz, you have voted for your mayors and your county judges. You can go to their meetings if you need to address them. Just try to go to the Attorney General's office and see if they'll let you in. Or if you can make an appointment Thursday to see Ken Paxton. It just won't happen. He doesn't have regularly scheduled meetings with 3 minutes at the mic on agenda items or non-agenda items. Those are standards in local government because the people demand to be heard. The state government is hostile to that. So what I can do is not prevent localities from having their say. I can also do some extreme measures like what Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota, had to do, and I'm proud to see a good Democratic lawyer do the necessary, which is file federal litigation in the United States courts under the 10th Amendment. We're all familiar with the First, the Second, the Fourth. Well, the 10th Amendment reserves to the states all powers not expressly reserved to the United States in the Constitution. So Ellison argued that ICE is not doing immigration, it's actually policing. And they're, like beating people down. They have invaded the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And he says that's a violation of the 10th Amendment rights of the state of Minnesota and their subsequent levels of government. So he has sued for an injunction to throw ICE out. That could happen, not with a Republican Attorney General here, but it could happen with a Democratic Attorney General. Believe it or not, some of the same abuses are happening in Texas. Also, they are happily building private detention facilities, you might call them, all over the state to house people, and people will be making money on that, I promise you. So human suffering will be monetized if Trump and Abbott have their way. The Attorney General cannot let that happen.
Just for the sake of clarity here, we've heard from a lot of different folks that you can not interfere with an ICE action and you can be arrested just by reporting it. You're the lawyer. What can you do as a private citizen? Can I watch the ICE vans roll into my neighborhood and post it on my neighborhood watch? What can I do and what can I not do? A long time ago, it's a funny story, I was recruited to work for the CIA. I was asked to spy on my own company. Okay?
I love it.
This is a true story. And I freaked out because I didn't want to do that. So I got a lawyer. I won't say who that was. But he advised me that I can report my contact with the CIA to my bosses. So that's exactly what I did. And the fear was, can I reveal some kind of investigation that's ongoing? What is the risk that I say something and then they arrest me for blowing the lid off something? So no, it's your right to talk about it's their risk and your right to reveal it. So my point is, can we talk about an ICE action?
Yes, you can. You can video with your phone.
Mm-hmm.
You can make noise. You can observe. You can protest. You can speak freely. All the things that we've come to understand our rights include.
So what do you imagine is the line of reasoning for Nome and for these folks to say, no, that is illegal and you can be arrested for it? What are they thinking? How do they get there?
Well, I mean, these are the same people that are in league with Pam Bondi, who shows up at a congressional hearing on the Epstein files and simply criticizes with a burn book in front of her. I don't give them any credence at all. So Kristi Noem's not a lawyer. She's not going to tell us what our rights under the Constitution are. I mean, this is a rebellion, a soft rebellion. We didn't vote for this. Those who did are even themselves shocked by the brutality of what they see.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's absolutely no correct discretion being applied. If there are violent criminals, maybe a couple of them are being picked up, but it just seems like the quota has overtaken the whole reason to create this ICE program, which was, claiming a mandate from a 2024 election to clean up the immigration issue in America and remove, the bad hombres or whatever Donald Trump referred to them as. Now it's mothers and children. People are terrified. America is no fun anymore. It's beyond that. It's brutal.
So one of the policies that the Kick Enterprise Club looks into, or we considered looking into, was immigration. We decided, no, we're going to stay away from that because it's a federal issue. That issue has grown, and we cannot avoid it anymore. It's just not possible to avoid. Our businesses are suffering because of ICE raids and what have you. I know that Republicans feel the same way. They just can't talk about it. What do you say to those people?
Thank you. So you're right. The Constitution clearly assigns immigration to Congress. It has failed in its essential mission to pass reform, updated laws, however you want to refer to it. And so the executive has run with the ball, and it is doing it for a base voter bloc to say, look, we're doing what you want. Now reelect us all. This is exactly the connection here. We need to elect Democrats who will do something in Congress, because the Republicans had their chance. They were asked by Trump to not pass the bill, and they were very compliant with that, just like when Reagan said, don't release the hostages in Tehran, let me get elected first and I'll do it. Or there was some talk about how Nixon didn't want certain things to happen in Vietnam until he got elected.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a well-worn path in American politics, and it's really shocking. So the midterms are an absolute opportunity. File this one under every action deserves a reaction. This horrible bloodletting in America, this brutalization, ought to result in a Democratic majority in both chambers of Congress, and we will, obviously present Trump an opportunity to do the right thing. We'll see what he does, and if he doesn't do it, then he needs to be impeached, because this is tearing America apart. Back home in Texas, we have 38 members of Congress we need to elect. Every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a federal matter. You're absolutely right. But in Texas, the good news is the Democratic Party has put up a candidate in every single congressional election for the first time since Watergate. And while I know the purpose of the Kick is not to get too intensely partisan, again, we go back to the first value we discussed, which was balance.
Mm-hmm.
And there needs to be more balance in government. And if the Republicans don't want to solve and reform immigration issues, which business has relied upon always, since America's founding, to further the American dream, whether it was building railroads across our beautiful continent or simply something as commercial as a restaurant staff or mowing your lawn or putting a roof on your house here in Harris County, the money derived from the hard sweat equity of immigrants is a good thing for the American dream. We need to preserve it, not abuse it. And so reform is mandatory.
How much interest do you see from Republicans, folks who whisper in your ear and say, hey, this is not what we signed up for. Is there a lot of that?
Yes, there is. And, people want to be careful. And, I understand. It used to be we didn't talk about politics at the dinner table or in social situations. Now it's all you see on certain entertainment channels. Movies are being made about it. It's inescapable. And frankly, the youth can't get away from it. You can see that the American dream in our youth's eyes is slipping away, and it's unattainable. That's not good for our future. We have to restore a sense of reasonableness to the public square. I see lots of Republicans, and where you're going to see it is in the turnout. I will say it wasn't that long ago in 2024, Democrats were kind of reticent to support the ticket because it was a little embarrassing to see how Joe Biden faded and was replaced. Whether you approve of the way the primary process functioned in nominating Kamala Harris, who, is a qualified candidate without question, but there were concerns and just enough of it where people said, hey, that's not how it's supposed to be done. Biden won the primary and then he kind of, expired, and then they replaced her without a real selection process. Arguably true, arguably not true. But that is what was presented on the ballot in 24. And you saw how Democrats just didn't turn out as we had in 2018. And as I predict, we will in 2026.
So how's the campaign going? And by that, I mean cash. You got less cash than the other guy. How do you make up the difference?
Yeah, we had plenty of cash, but not as much as the next guy because, he was a state senator who had been collecting cash from PACs and lobbyists for, close to 8 years before I even got started. We ended the calendar year with $250,000 cash on hand, and that's plenty of money to do what you need to do when you're not burning your resources like my main opponent is. I mean, he has this large staff that he has to pay monthly salaries to. I think we're spending our money much more strategically and smarter. So no one has gotten around the state more than Joe Jaworski. I like to call myself Joey Hustle. And
there you go.
Yeah, and you can see it in the endorsements. I've gotten 46 clubs and organizations. My main opponent has 12. It's not even close. I mean, like it's a factor of almost 4. And so I said,
and is that just hustle? You talk to everybody, or are there ideological things that make a difference?
Both. A lot of the clubs are the heart and soul of the Democratic movement. I am clearly the progressive, people-oriented candidate. My main opponent is the insider who's been negotiating with Dan Patrick and sort of, voting with Republicans on certain matters. And that's not very popular in the primary. And he can't really explain himself either as to what he meant when he limited SNAP benefits or voted to ban pride flags, voted to suppress free speech on campuses, voted for a constitutional proposition to clarify that you have to be a United States citizen, which is going to lead to a show me your papers, birth certificate, or driver's license type thing at the polls. He can't really explain himself as to why he did that other than he needs to cooperate in the Senate, which is fine. Stay in the Senate then. You're trying to go to the Attorney General's office. So I think people are much more accepting of a former mayor who stood alone on the question of public housing and delivered successfully the construction. So as a lawyer, I certainly outweigh both my opponents in terms of experience. And I'm proud to say that, I'm the kind of lawyer like John Hill was as Attorney General who will appear in court on behalf of the state of Texas.
Very good. Very good. We look forward to having you there. Question. Where are you in the polls? Have you done any polling, and how does it look? Have you done a couple? Do you see progress?
I think there's been 4 polls that I've seen. I've been in the lead on 3 of them, and just barely second in one of them. So, I mean, it didn't shock me. When you have more than 2 candidates in a race, you ought to be prepared for a runoff. And so, there were 5 candidates for the Democratic nomination in 2022, and I made a runoff barely, but I made it. It is probably likely that myself and Nathan Johnson will be in a runoff, but, that's not certain. So we'll see.
I want to go back to one of the priorities of the kick. We have 5. We talked about one, which is broadening the supplier base for both government and corporations. Another very important thing for us is energy and healthcare. We also want to look at education and technology, but wanted to stick to energy for just a second. We got a federal government that is abandoning ship pretty much on any progressive approaches to energy production. Environmental rules are out the way. It seems crazy. Texas is the largest producer of wind energy. What do you do to help us in Texas navigate the weirdness of having a renewable energies base, but then being told by the federal government that, that's not the way to go, because you also have traditional fossil fuels. We need to develop on all fronts, and I wonder, is there a role for the Attorney General to weigh in on that?
I think there is. I mean, first off, a more of the above approach fits a state as vast as Texas. And it's funny. I know we are seen as an oil and gas hub, and we should be. But we also are seen as a business model. And Greg Abbott, heralds that. Why would you want to turn away alternative energy businesses that create jobs? I mean, there's if we're going to have all these data centers and a growing population as we've had. I mean, we're surpassing 32 million, and there's still so much room to build homes and to create new cities if we wanted to. And people keep coming to Texas for the weather, the opportunity, the culture. I say bring it on. But why would you want to limit good businesses that wind energy, geothermal energy?
If the people want those options, and the federal government is basically telling their lackeys here that the way to go is traditional fossil fuels, et cetera, which we love. We love our fossil fuels.
Sure.
Nothing against them. But is there not a role for the people to say legally, we want to force the issue, and we want to promote actively renewable energy, and in that way make it somehow a legal issue? Or do you want to stay away from that and let the Railroad Commission handle that or whatever?
Oh, what a great question. I see what you're saying. The answer is yes. The people ought to be able to essentially pick the innovations in a society in which they live in. And unfortunately, we have to elect people to represent us. I mean, that's a fortunate thing. But when voter turnout is so low and gerrymandering is so outrageous, and the limited agenda to stay in office every 2 years is so brutal, we don't get to these electives, shall we say. It's almost like going to a school. You're an adult. You want to take some cool electives, and they're like, no, these are the only courses that are available to you. You would reject that. You would rebel against that. Here, Texas is one of those states, Fritz, that doesn't allow a citizen initiative process, which is a petition-led.
It does not allow that?
It does not. Our Constitution does not provide for it, and other states have. Kansas, of all places, dealt with.
Talk about that. What are you describing?
So there are more than 10 states. I don't know the exact number, but it's not an insignificant number that allow citizen-led petitions to create a referendum to amend the Constitution or pass a statute. Like, you bypass the Senate and the House. Like, you don't need them if they're not going to perform.
Okay.
The citizens can just, it takes a lot of signatures. And I think it's usually like 10% of the voter roll or those who voted in the last election. Cities do it all the time. The city of Houston's done it. City of Galveston has done it. It's in the nature of recall almost, like where people get upset about something and someone starts a petition. And if you get, within a 30 to 45, 60-day time frame, the adequate number of signatures, it can be approved by, the Secretary of State if it's statewide, or, the city secretary.
So it sounds like you're talking about directly citizenry legislating.
Correct.
Wow. That's amazing.
And we don't have that on the state level, and we should. And we would have to amend our Constitution to do it. Now, every 2 years, it seems like there's just 16, 17 constitutional amendments. The legislature decides which ones those are. And it's, they keep calling it tax relief. It's anything but, or, let's, confirm that you have to be a United States citizen to vote, which the Constitution in Texas already says, et cetera. But if you really wanted to change up the structure of power that would be much more people-friendly, you would put term limits in. Okay. You would do campaign finance caps, like no more than $5,000 a person. None of these $1 million checks. You would do independent redistricting commission instead of rampant gerrymandering. And then finally, you would allow citizen-led initiative legislation.
Maybe the energy question is not the easiest way of asking the question, but healthcare is. Federal government had Medicare funds, Medicaid funds for us. Our illustrious governor said, no, we don't want them. Why could the Attorney General say, on behalf of the people, we do want them?
Well, people like their lawyers to be creative. And sometimes
nobody likes their lawyers.
Well,
nobody likes their lawyers.
Until they need one. But whether it's criminal law or civil law, there are countless stories of creativity, and that's the whole point. Is the law is not static, which always kind of tickles me that people talk about reading the Constitution as it was written in 1776. Well, I mean, if that were the case, then we'd all be historians, not lawyers. But what I would say is on health care, an attorney general ought to push back against Greg Abbott and the Republican cabal saying, when it's time for our annual taxes that we pay under threat of going to prison, when it's time for them to come back in the form of a Medicaid match, Greg Abbott's saying, no, give it to New Jersey. We don't want it because, it had something to do with Barack Obama. Wait a minute. That means our county tax bills across the state are higher because, Fritz, as you know, counties are responsible for the public health. So here in Harris County, LBJ Hospital, Ben Taub has to deal with emergency matters when people show up at the emergency room close to death because Medicaid wasn't accepted, the match wasn't accepted, meaning they could have gotten primary health care earlier before things got serious. So we pay these massive county tax bills every year to sustain public health when all we have to do is get our federal taxes to come back home. Why anybody, whether you're Republican or Democrat, would push away billions of dollars a year that are our taxes trying to come home like the birds coming south is beyond me. So to answer your question, the people, so far, all they really can do is elect Democrats who clearly campaign religiously on the Medicaid match.
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess we're going to wrap it up here, but one question that frequently comes up, and that is, what can the Attorney General do on behalf of its citizens to protect from the federal government, from employees of the federal government?
Well, as my old law partner used to say, sue 'em, is what he'd say. And so, I mean, that lawsuit I described, several minutes ago that Keith Ellison in Minnesota filed against Department of Homeland Security. Well, the first defendant is Kristi Noem. And so, you have to sue the head of the agency that's doing the harm on the question of, energy, Medicaid match. If there is a federal policy or action that is harming Texans, then the Attorney General should act. The reason Ken Paxton, as Attorney General, doesn't act is, the fix is in with him. He's running for U.S. Senate out of his office, and he doesn't want to do anything. They must have like a Thursday lunch, Abbott, Patrick, and him, where they all just kind of check in on what they're all doing. And they're clearly on the same team. I don't feel like there's any independence there at all.
Well, look, I think we've come to the end of a very nice podcast, first podcast. We really appreciate you being here. But as we say, we've reached the point of diminishing returns. So last segment here, last couple of minutes, I want to give you to make the case. Why should business care that Joe Jaworski gets elected?
Business wants predictability and wants integrity in an office called the Office of Attorney General. This is the state's top lawyer. And think about how the rule of law is something that ought to be humming in the background so that we all have confidence in our contracts, confidence in education, confidence in transportation, confidence in the food supply, all the things that make up a life, housing, and frankly, security. We don't want rampant crime in our communities. We want, if you're a business, large or small, you want your employees to show up on time and to perform and be productive. So the Office of Attorney General should not be a moral prosecutor, and that is what it has become, not for morality per se, but simply to please a diminishing base of voters in a Republican primary. They could care less about November because the fix is in and there's just so much voter suppression. So as Attorney General, my pitch to business is I'm going to be looking for nonpartisan or bipartisan victories, like registering more of our 18-year-olders. Not going to tell them who to vote for, but that's a good thing when young Texans who will soon be entering the workforce are committed to their civics. I am going to be an attorney general that wants to have the broadest approach on energy because God knows we're going to need it, whether it's a cold storm coming every 5 or 6 years that'll turn off the lights or just more growth, homes and businesses. I'm going to be an attorney general that wants everyone as healthy as possible. So I'll be having a word with United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield to honor such niche matters in healthcare policy like the Mental Health Parity Act, because we want our young boys and girls who may be struggling with depression as they grow because life is very complex to receive the mental health care they need. Health insurance is supposed to pay for that under federal law, and so often insurers are loath to support mental health care just like they do physical health care. And on, Fritz. So my argument to business is this is a great state. We have so much going for us, but we don't need the institutions of government being used like the church was back in the Dark Ages to beat people and to persecute them. We need to have a much more secular society, and government can function in that way.
That's not red. That's not blue. That's just common sense. So
yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Joe. Appreciate you being with us, and we'll keep track of you.
Thank you.
Take care. Political ad paid for by the Kick Enterprise Club.